We have a question that says, I've been asked to present my ID every time I've ever voted. Was that legal?
It was.
Yeah, because here in Louisiana, this is the thing. We've been, we have to show our ID, and we've been doing that for quite some time.
I was telling Kevin off air. Many of it's interesting that we're having this conversation here in Louisiana, because I must admit that many of the issues that other states are dealing with, we're actually on the front end of doing some right things here in the state of Louisiana.
That's true.
But my contention is that this issue goes far beyond the state of Louisiana. We look at our neighboring states like Mississippi and Alabama and Georgia and South Carolina. There's some very real concerns that are occurring, and so we can't just take the attitude that, well, here in Louisiana we're moving forward, so we're now separate and apart from the other 49 other states that made the Voter Rights Act important to pass in the first place.
Yeah, and let's backtrack just a little bit, because we've been talking about Section 5, Section 4. Explain to our viewers, Section 5 is the pre-clearance section. That is intact, but it's Section 4 that was struck down that essentially makes Section 5 moot, right?
What Section 4 basically did was that is determine the formula as to what would be used and determine which states had to actually go through pre-clearance. And what they did was they looked at, I guess, past practices to see which states had the most egregious practices throughout from 1965 on back. And most of those states, as most of us know, were those states that were identified in the southern portion of the United States. You know, so that's Section 4 dealt with that formula, and Section 5 was the actual pre-clearance authorization.
Right, and so essentially what the justices are saying is that you got to go back and rework the formula, right? That's essentially what they're saying.
And I think they should. Again, I mean, looking at the number of registered voters in Louisiana compared to any other state, I think we've done a tremendous job in Louisiana. And I mean, that is one of the things. You're asking a question about the voting, having to show your driver's license. I did want to add one thing.
Yeah.
And some people say, it's like, well, what if I lost my driver's license? What if it...
Yeah, what
you
do they
can
do?
simply go and just sign an affidavit at the polling place. They will ask you questions to identify yourself, something such as your mother's maiden name, your social security number. We're not trying to suppress any voters in Louisiana.
That's good to know.
Maybe Louisiana may not be trying to suppress any voters compared to some of our neighboring states, but I think when you look at this entire civil rights conversation, particularly as it relates to these 10 states that were determined to have pre-clearance in the first place, I think the motive is still, in fact, out, and the validity of what they're attempting to do, I think, is in question by a lot of individuals.
And even if you do suspect that there is discrimination of whatever kind when it comes to voting, you still can pursue a legal remedy.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. But the reality is this: most folks I know don't have the money to hire an attorney. Most folks I know who live in my particular district, if they're in fact disenfranchised at the voting polls or in similar districts throughout the entire United States of America, or in these 10 states that we're speaking of, my district is very similar to those particular districts. So that's why I have to champion this particular issue.
But I think there are many organizations who are ready and willing to take up any of those causes if it is brought to their attention.
Well, and unfortunately, if they take it to the Supreme Court, it may lose on a 5-4 verdict, just like this one just